Hello! I am still reading Miss Hickory, and we're at the part of the story where Fawn is discovering that he's going to be all alone, and he is going to be hiding out in the basement of the old abandoned place where they're taking shelter in the cellar here. Fawn thought that he was dreaming when he felt a soft, warm flank pressing close beside him. He was in a troubled sleep, light and fitful, because it was one of the first nights of bitter cold. He turned, nuzzled dough in his dream, and then leaped away as a strange moo broke the dark silence. Leaping out of the cellar hole, Fawn saw a creature not so different from himself, a bit plumper, but as softly brown with big tender eyes and matching Fawn's height. The strange bedfellow came over and rubbed noses with him. Then it leaned in warm friendliness against Fawn's trembling body. It coaxed Fawn gently into a spinney of birch trees close by where they lay down side by side, and Fawn went to sleep in peace. So neither was alone again. Wild-Heifer had found a brother and Fawn a sister, and Wild-Heifer and Fawn ran together after that. Oh, isn't that cute? Wild-Heifer's supper party. There's Miss Hickory. Back to her story. Crack! Crack! Cheddar cheese, silence! Crack, crack! Miss Hickory wrinkled her small nut face. Only too well did she know the meaning of those sounds. Down in his hole at the foot of her tree, Squirrel was cracking and eating the nuts he had harvested at such thought and urging on her part. Now in December, with snow on the ground and often a light crust on top of the snow, it was high time to think seriously about food for the winter. Miss Hickory had not completely lost her fear of Squirrel. When they met in the orchard, Squirrel had an uncomfortable way of looking hard without speaking at her head. In playful moods, he still tried to pull off her winter hat. In fact, he had taken off and eaten the trimming. But on one of the first stormy nights of the winter, when snow fell and their tree rocked with the wind, when Miss Hickory had thought that the snow was an enemy instead of a blanket, Squirrel had come up boughs, and Miss Hickory pulled her leaf covers up to her chin, shivering more from the cold, from fear than cold. She had seen two little gray paws clutched at the edge of her nest, two bright eyes peeping in at her. She sat up in bed. There he is. There's Squirrel. Sharing her nest. That would be scary if your head was a nut. And what do you want at this time of night? She had demanded. Only to keep you from worrying, Miss Hickory, Squirrel had said. He came farther and squeezed in beside her, all but his bushy tail that hung outside the nest. Only to try and keep you warm. Squirrel had patted Miss Hickory's cheek with one paw. Very kind of you, very kind, I must say, she had retorted bitterly. Would you like my bed for the night, and let me sleep in your hole? I dare say it's more weather-tight than this nest. Oh, no, thank you so much. Squirrel had scampered down the tree to his cozy hole that was carpeted with old moss and had a pile of nuts in one corner. No harm meant, he chattered on his way down. As she remembered that night, Miss Hickory asked herself if she had been fair to Squirrel. His poor memory, his inability to make a plan were unfortunate, yet he had not seemed covetous of her head, only amused at it. So on this day of early winter, Miss Hickory jumped and swung herself down the tree, down boughs, and stood quite a while at the entrance to Squirrel's hole, only watching. Presently a squirrel cracked and ate another nut. She spoke. How about tomorrow, young lad? She asked. Squirrel jumped. He thought hard, trying to find an excuse. Then, I'll start right out today, gathering more beech nuts, he chattered. And then what? Can you remember where your hole is? Can you keep from eating your nuts on the way home? If you do replenish your pantry, will you hold to 3 meals a day instead of 6? Now, Miss Hickory, Squirrel's bright eyes took on a canny glint, it is easy for you to keep your nut. Miss Hickory did not wait. She was off and away as fast as her skates would take her. They had been shoes made of strong bark last summer, but rough going and climbing up and down her tree since she moved had worn them to sharp edges. Miss Hickory now had skates or snowshoes, whichever she needed. She skimmed off on the icy crust of the snow as fleet as a deer, and suddenly as happy as a sharp snowy winter day can make one. Her objective was food. No longer could she depend upon her canning of a season ago, but she knew that frozen foods had become popular. Every berry bush and seed pod was her cafeteria. She skated first over the field known as high mowing. Black alder berries grew along the edge, tasty and crisp for her snack. Before she reached their winter shelter, she heard the clucking song of content that had come from the Ladies' Aid Society, which she had helped to found. Hen Pheasant was there, and huddled close beside her were a number of other drab little hens. The blanket of snow that covered the beautiful bed quilt or leaves that they had made only kept them warmer, and the colors of the quilt brighter. They seemed happy enough nestling together without the pheasant and his lordly fellows. Miss Hickory caught scraps of talk. He has to walk in his best coat-tails in plain sight down the road and into the stubble to get his breakfast. Our food is right here. Hen Pheasant gave a gay peck at a kernel of corn. They'll all come back to us later. It is the custom that we sit, and they should nest separately in the winter. Plenty of corns and seeds for us right here. So the Ladies' Aid Society crooned and clucked. They are all right. I won't disturb them, Miss Hickory thought as she bit a red alderberry, then skated across the road and into the acre piece. First Brook ran along one side of Acre Piece. Wild roses grew on its banks. Now in December, there were no leaves on the wild rose bushes, but the rose hips covered it with color. Round and painted by the frost, the hips of the wild roses looked like little oranges waiting for Miss Hickory to pick them. And she did. She said as she crunched the good frozen goodness of the fruit and seeds. Then Miss Hickory rested a while, looked down, listening to the tiny sound of the brook under its thin roof of ice. She wondered where the brook was going, for it never stood still as the frog pond did. Where did it come from? First Brook had another attraction for Miss Hickory. In summer, wild grapes grew on the vines along the banks. Young trees, tall ferns, and a tangle of sumac hid the dark purple clusters of the grapes. Look at her skating. So that only wood creatures picked them when they ripened in the autumn. There were still many frozen grapes for Miss Hickory's desserts. She cut figure eights on the ice. 8 grapes skimmed on and on along First Brook, with the current circling on beneath the ice. She went further than she knew. All at once the bank looked oddly like old times. She left the ice, climbed the steep bank of First Brook, and there she was at the old place. She was just behind the barn. The hours had slipped by so pleasantly, skating, sliding, eating, that it was nearly supper time when Miss Hickory reached the barn. And there's where we'll leave it until next time, with Miss Hickory skating on the ice, eating frozen grapes.